Hello folks, and welcome to this video presentation that I'm going to put together where I'm going to be going through the forensics on this most salient, enigmatic, intriguing and amazing document issued by the Committee of 300. As you can see here, it's a Treasury certificate. So from the Committee of 300 acting through the United Nations to the Philippine Islands, represented by ASBLP group of companies, okay, that otherwise lists at the time all of the world assets and wealth, okay, of every single private bank account and major central bank, as you can see here, and all the amounts, the numbers, the account names, the account numbers that are beyond trillions. Okay, that this document was put together in recognition of an incredible story and case that was put forward in the international courts, the world courts, on behalf of the Philippines, okay, which goes back to wealth that originated in the Philippines back during the Mongol Empire, okay, around 965 AD, that the Mongols used, that the Philippines actually loaned out to the Mongols to help perpetuate their empire, right? And there's the Mongolian account here, as you can see, that there was an agreement that the Mongols were going to give that gold, platinum, diamond, whatever it was, back to them after a certain period of time. But the Mongols then went off to proliferate all throughout Asia, Europe, and even ended up in the Americas, believe it or not. I think contrary to the mainstream belief, they did cross the seas. And I'd hazard a guess that they definitely didn't reign that amount of land on horseback. I think they had secret knowledge of the Stargate structure here on Earth. That their empire then kind of declined, and a lot of these treasures that they took from the Philippines proliferated and were deposited and hid, in certain locations around the world that were otherwise rediscovered then by the rising empires of the Asians and the European settlers, which are then used to fund their empires. Okay, none more so than the Spaniards, who ended up going to the Americas, as we know, and then ended up actually going to the Philippines and occupied the Philippines illegally for 333 years. And this kind of like folklore, myth, and almost fairy tale of the origin of the wealth, that was proliferated and how it then was used to fund all these empires that otherwise funded the invasion of their own country by the Spaniards, was kind of still being whispered and kept through this family line of the Telanos, okay, I believe, which you can see here. This is kind of like my little code cheat sheet. King Luisong Tagian Telano is otherwise King Bernardo Caprio, as we'll see mentioned a lot in these documents of the history, that this story of the wealth is ours. These guys, they're using our wealth and they're here legally. That America got involved, obviously the revolution in the Philippines, they got involved. They then bought it off. They bought Philippine Islands off of Spain. Filipinos still weren't happy because they were like, we got all this evidence. And around that time, Dr. Jose Rizal, okay, was a statesman back then, who was helping to, fuel and fund and inspire the revolution against the Spaniards, and particularly, obviously, the United States after that, that he was, again, led into information to go and rediscover documents relating to the secrets of where all this wealth was stored, and the certificate of deposits and agreements that were made all throughout history that prove that all of what was used to fund the kind of European settlements all throughout that millennia, the previous millennia from 1000 to 2000, all originated from the Philippines. Okay, and so it got to a point where they surmised and recollected so much of the documents and treasures and evidence that I think it was King George VI had to open up the World Court, the International Court, in order to hear the case on behalf of the family at the time. I think it was under Ferdinand E. Marcos, right, coming up through the lineage of Dr. Jose Rizal, who was his great-grandfather, in order to prove that this is the people's wealth and it's owed to the Philippines under the last will and testament of King Luisong Tagian Telano. And so the court actually granted them the affirmation that we agree this wealth that had been used to otherwise fund, all these other bankers and banks throughout the world with their empires does belong to the Filipinos. And so through this Treasury certificate is then recognizing that fact and actually gifting it back to the Philippine people, but represented by the ASBLP company, right, which otherwise means, as you can see on my code sheet, Ang Samahan and Banggong Lahing in Filipino, which means the new organization of the people of the Philippines. Now, this is where it gets a bit tricky, because once that kind of happens, I believe there's been a sleight of hand by the private serving banksters, okay, on planet, who wanted to hoard that wealth and not release the last will and testament of what these funds were put in trust to begin with, and what was the will of these guys, especially all the way up through to Ferdinand E. Marcos, who's kind of like the main guy, kind of brought all this together and set all this up with the agreements of the Committee 300 at the time post World War II. Was to have it benefit the world, okay, and this, I believe, was what was going to be given us this kind of Nasara Jasara turn of the century around 2000, this new millennium, for all this wealth to be then gifted for humanitarian purposes, because that was his last will and testament. That was the whole modus operandi behind the trust he set up for all this wealth to be managed, right? In order for it to be used, I think 70% to help the people of the Philippines, and then 30% to help the people of the world. That otherwise got usurped. And this goes into, I believe, what happened in 9/11. The World Trade Centers were mentioned in this document, and historical documents as well. Okay, and so it's a truly incredible story that we're going to go through. That I was obviously made notes on. So I spent 2 weeks dissecting, and otherwise proves a lot of things. None more so than the secret management team behind the scenes that are working through what most people only see and hear of from the public side, with the United Nations, the IMF, Bank of International Settlements, World Bank Group, etc. Okay, that the Committee of 300, the Trilateral Commissions involved as well. We've got documents involving these guys. On the private side, act behind the shadow of the public realm interface that we all see and is all pumped with in regards to the Mongol libraries, the Mongol universities, and the Mongol media, as to what's going on and how these countries are trillions and trillions in debt, when in reality they have on account with their records on the private side beyond trillions. Okay, and so it goes into also post the courts, post World War II, when this kind of was decided that yes, we recognize this as the Filipino wealth. They entered into a 50-year agreement to basically use all the outstanding gold and silver and diamonds and platinum and stuff that had been hoarded and discovered and kind of kept in those given nations around the world, to perpetuate a 50-year loan agreement to act to back the paper currency during that whole era post World War II up until 2000. And then once 2000 hit, that matured, and the whole agreement was for that wealth to then be reconstituted under a trust with the ASBLP, okay, and then used to benefit all of humanity, to get everyone up to first world, end poverty and everything else, war, hunger, crime, and just really roll out this kind of new Christic age, as it were, because they certainly had all the means in which to do so. And as we've discovered in previous presentations, and I have done my research, money, economics is all accounting. They're all numbers and figures, and so inequality is just basically an accounting and distribution issue. And as we know, a lot of these banks now are unlimited, and as we'll see, especially with this document right at the top, a lot of these accounts have confirmed eternal guaranteed balances of infinite dollar. Okay, so truly fascinating document that otherwise led me to the supposed trust and organization that is putting together a case at the moment, okay, to claim back the wealth as per the last will and testament. Okay, that's otherwise been usurped by these private banking interests that don't want this rolled out for humanity, for various reasons, just because they are very anti-Christic and kind of on the side of the Shaitani, right? The Illuminati, the Leviathan races. That this website, because I traced all the breadcrumbs, so I checked out ASBLP, so I was like, where's ASBLP? Went on the internet, they had a little website, and then I shared that on my Telegram group. 2 days later, that website shut down. And I'm thinking, well, who controls this wealth? What is going on with this story? And found that this website, King Solomon United Trust, okay, King Solomon United Tribal Republic Trust, is claiming that these are the rightful owners of all the world's assets. Okay, and they've got an incredible library of knowledge pertaining to this history, and also the decrees, okay, that were agreed for what this wealth should be used for. Okay, and a notice to all fiduciaries, which is basically all of the members of the Committee of 300, as part of this new world legal order, to give back the wealth to the people as per the trust indenture and the last will and testament of Ferdinand E. Marcos. Okay, so fascinating to keep tabs as to what develops out of this. Not too sure as to when this website was put together and this kind of list with the notice was issued, because it's all protected under international court orders and international law as well, with the Embargo Act, etc. That all of these signees, okay, under this document agreed, but unfortunately, it has since been usurped, and they're playing silly buggers and not wanting to roll out the wealth that this trust and all the predecessors, the successor trustees, who were in control of the wealth, which are these statesmen and royal families in the Philippines, wanted for the world. As you can see here, 70% for the people of the Philippine Islands and 30% for the rest of the world. Okay, so interesting to keep tabs on this website. This website otherwise hasn't come down since I came across it, because these guys are currently through this, King Solomon Trust, are trying to actually go after these private self-serving interest groups, these banksters, cabal bankers, to reclaim that wealth and make sure that every member nation abides by the will of Ferdinand E. Marcos, going all the way back to King Bernardo Caprio, which is King Luisong Tagiantilano. Okay, so we're gonna go through this. It's going to be quite a long presentation, probably, to dissect everything, but I've got a few really good documents that I'm going to highlight and whiz through it. Okay, but the key is we're going to first go through this document, okay, and then we're going to go through my notes in order to dissect, the history and what's going on. And there's another document I found that's really good as well that highlights the kind of story. And again, it's like anything, 7 times exposure, as you go through it over and over again, you're just going to get a better picture as to what's happening and get informed, and otherwise, help share this video with others and this incredible story as to what's going on. And it's that kind of 100th monkey effect that if more and more of us become aware, we can actually help shift things on the planet, because this organization seems to be of the side of the crest, who are going after these private banking interests that have reneged or failed in their duties of fiduciary trustees to help implement the distribution of wealth under these humanitarian programs, okay, with what the people of the Philippines, the states people who owned all this wealth, wanted for the rest of the world and the Philippine people. Okay, so yeah, truly fascinating. So before we get into that, I just want to quickly skim over this code cheat sheet to keep in mind as we read through. So Ferdinand E. Marcos, right, as the president, he goes by many aliases and international code names accounts, such as King Anthony Santiago Martin, which is King ASM for short, ASBLP, which is the company we saw, the group company, 777, Spiritual King David of Israel, Spiritual King Solomon of Israel, TVM, Tiburcio Villamor Marcos, TVM LSM 666, Spiritual Wonder Boy, White Eagle, White Mongolian, White Vatican, Code of Quran. Okay, so when you see all these names, these are just names for accounts that this individual controlled. Okay, that was linked to. We also have Dr. Joseph Rizal, who's a great grandfather of Ferdinand E. Marcos. And then ASBLP, we all went through that. Okay, it means the new organization of the people of the Philippines. And then this is the trust decree and agreement. Okay, you might see that number mentioned quite a few times. And King Bernardo Caprio is King Luisong Tagiantilano. Okay, and this is otherwise what is mentioned in the document. And if we just quickly have a look, you can see it's a legendary figure in Philippine mythology who's said to be the cause of earthquakes, numerous tales, All right, so otherwise we're referencing this individual, the King Tilano family line. And yeah, what's interesting, you'll see a birth certificate, okay, which is signed by Queen Elizabeth as the chairman of the Committee of 300 at the time. Of course, it always changes. And what's interesting, certificate of live birth. Okay, notice how it's a live birth because they're dealing on the private side of the ledger with these accounts. And what we'll find out later is that they actually use multiple registered birthdays for the same individual to, open up exclusive accounts and to keep accounting records of those different accounts. Okay, all linked to the same individual, but under multiple issued certificate of live births. Okay, and this is otherwise what we see happen here in order to, I believe, set up the ASBLP or a new account. Okay, that all of this wealth is then going to be consolidated into, which is probably acting through the ASBLP companies and ASBLP BLP Bank, as we saw at the top of the document. All right, so keep that in mind with the codes. A lot of these are just linked to, a lot of these names of the accounts are linked to the same individuals controlling those accounts. And this is otherwise the notes I put together, which I'll share all documents down below in the description on Google Drive folder or Dropbox for people to go through. Okay, so it's truly fascinating. These are otherwise the notes that I kind of skimmed over as I was reading through this document, and then obviously through the King Solomon website that we'll read through once we kind of skim over this document. Okay, so as we can see here, the Committee 300 through the United Nations Organization, so these guys are acting through the United Nations Organization because they control it, awarding this Treasury Certificate of the People of the Philippine Islands, represented by ASBLP Group of Companies and Bank of ASBLP with International Registry. Again, there's the numbers. So we can see here, United Nations Organization, International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, World Bank Group, and the Financial Action Task Force. This is the history, again, that we're going to otherwise go through in this other document. But you guys, again, I'll share this document. You can read through it in your own time. There's a few other variations of this history that go into a little bit more information. Okay, that's shared on the King Solomon Trust website. See, it's all stamped every page. And this is the general party information, top secret, not anymore, unfortunately, guys. Sorry about that. So you've got the name of signatory, Anthony Santiago Martin. Okay, this is otherwise the account that was set up through Ferdinand E. Marcos. And again, there is so let's just pull up the code again so we kind of know what we're dealing with in a sense. C3-AM-01 is the trust decree document, okay, which otherwise we'll go over, which is over at the website. As you can see, if you navigate to King Solomon Trust decrees, there it is, C3-AM-01 0001. And this is otherwise taken from historical documents that we'll go through. Okay, and otherwise the actual documents for the Committee of 300 is also listed at this website. Okay, so very, very interesting. It's just taking a while to load. So let's go all the certificates here. So the Committee of 300 document is, I think, under global assets. Yeah, that's it. So it's under global assets. Which is right here. As you can see, King Solomon Global Assets. This is what these guys are claiming that they should rightfully be owning and controlling, but due to, like I said, the sleight of hand by the international bankers. And this is otherwise the new setup under President Ferdinand Marcos, his last one, a testament. Through all these agreements under the Treaty of Nations, these guys should have control. Okay, TVM, LSM 666. Remember, that's another accounting to Ferdinand Marcos. And then it's these guys on the private side acting through these institutions that should merely be guardians as part of the trust structure. Okay. So yeah, very fascinating. So here we have the White Mongolian account, White Vatican account. Okay, all these names again. Look, King Bernardo Caprio, Dr. Joseph Rizal, Antonio Diaz Santiago. Okay, White Eagle. Holy Heaven Father account, Trustee Origin, there's Ferdinand Marcos. Again, Treasury backup for dollar, Japanese, and yen. Nature of deposits, physical and eternal deposits. Okay, so we have the fiduciary bank accounts information. These special bank accounts have declared, certified, and reconfirmed as off-balance account record sheet. Okay, this means that it's kept off balance. It's not on the public ledger. It's on the private side. It's otherwise their way of just saying it's private. Okay, these funds are private, and these are accounts that are otherwise on the public side, like I said, it's completely different realms to the private. With this whole journey of sovereignty and law, straw man deception. Okay, all accounts are drained in cash funds since year 2000. Now this is where the loan agreement matured, and this is when all the funds should have been shifted into basically a new trust structure in order to proliferate for humanitarian means across the globe. But that hasn't happened. I believe 9/11's gone into this, and that's one of the reasons why they took the towers down. But it's interesting, you'll see that it's mentioned in here that if the Twin Towers get demolished as planned by the second party, which was Queen Elizabeth, believe it or not, then this ASBLP group of companies had to be set up in order to protect the wealth. So quite interesting how they're kind of like, they knew about the potential plans of what was going to happen, make contingencies, right? So, but having sovereign guarantee by precious commodities preserved and untouched in the Philippine Islands, okay, permissibly engraving of multi-currency bills in the Philippine Islands and or in the United States of America, and written in US Treasury notes, top secret, and will be released and update its actual audited balances on January 25th, 2008, although having been drained and these authorities reconfirmed, declared, certified, and reconsidered the veracity and validity of all herein bank account information entitled and inherited to the people of the Philippine Islands, okay, 70%, and the world, 30%, under the trusteeship, management and control of ASBLP group of companies and Bank of ASBLP, represented and chaired by His Majesty King Anthony S. Martin, which will be undisclosed, all its actual balances information from this date, January 25th, 2007 until January 25th, 2008. So you can see this is otherwise a year issued. Treasury certificates normally issued for 1 year. All accounts herewith are densely coded into 4 unchanged codes: White Spiritual Boy, Spiritual Wonder Boy, Morning Star, and King David. However, it depends upon the requisition and desire of the trust decree in his papers, together with the inclusion of any herein confirmed fiduciary heritage accounts, except Falcon 1 up to Falcon 909, that requested by former World Bank President Robert McNamara by phone, also draining cash funds since year 2000. Okay, said fiduciary bank accounts are amenable to change its original position and information upon requisition of the trust decree. And then it says below listed accounts have confirmed eternal guarantee balances of infinite dollar. Okay, so I got a feeling that possibly the ASBLP group of companies with who controlled and put that together, because President Ferdinand Marcos died in 1989, and this was all meant to be rolled out circa 2000 and beyond. Okay, and so I believe this is kind of like proving some of the usurping that went on through this organization. So they basically gained control of the account and kind of set up a pseudo proxy organization, which is this ASBLP group of companies, right, in this website. So I'm just going to show you the website because they actually took it down, which is quite interesting, but I managed to screen record it. Okay, and these guys were claiming to be the primary holders of all the wealth as per, you know, the agreement that was made. And so I believe these guys were kind of using this and create a registered company, which was actually part of the Panama Papers, which is quite interesting, as you can see here, in order to usurp control of all these world assets and not proliferate, obviously, what was mentioned in the trust decree, okay, which was part of the agreement, which is held in historical records and, you know, on record with the international courts as well. That, yeah, since then it's obviously been taken down, but I believe this was kind of like, yeah, they set up a proxy ASBLP, and since then have obviously probably moved it to something else. But like I said, King Solomon Trust has been set up to try and go after these guys and say, look, you guys are in breach of trust, quite literally, acting fraudulently and taking these funds for your own self-interest and not what it was originally intended to be used for, okay, which was the enlightenment and end of poverty and, you know, basically lifting humanity up across the whole world, not only just the Philippines. Okay, so these are some of the eternal guaranteed balances of infinite dollar, which is quite interesting. Okay, so it just goes alphabetically in each region, so North and South American continents. So you've got Citibank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. All right, so it keeps going on and on and on. Got the South Americas as well. Okay, then you've got the Far East, Middle East, and Central Asian continents. Okay, all the major banks there. Eternal guaranteed deposits of infinite US dollar. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. Okay, so Bank of Israel. There we go. And then here we got Bank of Philippine Islands, linked to a lot of these bank accounts as well. Bangkok. Then we have the African continents, European continents, We've got central banks in there as well mentioned. Deutsche Bank, Bank of Greece. Then we got Pacific Island continents. All right, then here we have these authorities have declared the validity of other fiduciary allocated accounts that are not listed above and forever agreed that upon execution of all authorities of the Committee of 300, said accounts listed above and accounts that are not listed will be forever be used, validated, authenticated, and utilized for development programs listed below. This certificate will be forever declared as valid and authentic without furthermore opposition and other negative means, and reconfirms and recognizes this instrument as divine and spiritual monetary instruments. Okay, and here it's mentioned chaired by, so the historical context, the assets and properties of the people of the Philippine Islands, represented by ASBLP Group of Companies and Bank of ASBLP, chaired by His Majesty King Anthony Santiago Martin, owner of birth certificate registration number, okay, laid to rest in the real testament of late President Ferdinand E. Marcos, okay, former holder of assets and properties of the Philippine Islands, written in Filipino language, and these authorities reconfirmed and recognized the validity and authenticity of herein testament originated from the late holder and have been originally preserved in the North Tower of the World Trade Center, New York, USA, before it fell down during 9/11 terrorist attack. However, the two original last copies of herein subject have been kept by former World Bank President Robert McNamara. Okay, so that's quite interesting. So they're claiming that this individual, King Anthony Santiago Martin, was the son of Ferdinand E. Marcos. Okay, that's debatable. They're saying that it's all linked to accounts that are set up. Otherwise, an individual has stepped in and they probably issued like maybe a fake birth certificate tacked on behalf of him, because it was otherwise kind of linking to a company rather than an individual. Okay, and any successor trustee who would otherwise follow the last one, a testament of Ferdinand E. Marcos. Okay, because there's absolutely no information on this individual, King Anthony Santiago Martin Jr., other than what's mentioned in King Solomon United Republic Trust, okay, and the offshore leak database, the Panama Papers. Okay, so there's a lot of mystery surrounding these folks because they're kind of talking in codes and accounts and companies rather than some individuals, actual individuals. And like, for instance, this individual, Bernardo Caprio, was actually King Louis Song Tagi and Talano. So here we got more accounts that listed. You can see the Filipino language there also. This document is mainly put together for. Okay, so now let's just go back up, because these are basically all the lists, okay, of all the assets of all the banks and the amounts, okay, that were in them at the time of doing this kind of appraisal. Okay, so you've got here alphabetically with all the countries, the central banks, and big private banks also. And so we'll just keep scrolling through just so you can see like the amount of wealth that these guys have control over. Okay, the Central Bank of Great Britain with account number, worth, okay, and every single account here is earning 4% per annum. All right, and some of these accounts actually have eternal guarantees, all right, of their infinite US dollar deposits. And then you've got Rothschild and Sons, Great Britain account, again, net balance of infinity. And it says here, it's quite interesting. This family is the one who made suggestions to the second party to amend all depository information for the people of the Philippine Islands in the future to the authorized party of President Ferdinand E. Marcos. So when people say that the Committee 300 isn't real, the world isn't managed by an elite group of private, self-elected, servant, individuals who meet up and decide on steering the world, this document otherwise proves otherwise, without a doubt, in black and white. Okay, that otherwise goes into a much higher level of off-world activity and other races, interdimensional and extraterrestrial. So we have the Central Bank of Israel as well. It's got quite a hefty account. That's earning 4% per annum, and also eternal deposit of infinite dollar guarantee. Central Bank of Italy, again, it's quite a big account, and these are also gold that's stashed there as well. We've got 10,000 metric tons of gold, 500,000 metric tons of gold in the Central Bank of Italy. Eternal guarantee as well, infinite US dollars. Central Bank of Japan, with also 500 metric tons of gold, so it's not as much. Again, their account is quite small in comparison. We've got also 70,000 metric tons, so they've got two different accounts operating through there. That's on this balance sheet. Remember, on the private side, we're dealing in the private side here. So the private side is backed by substance. Okay, it is backed by something of substance, in this case, gold. Central Bank of Mongolia. Okay, it's quite a hefty account. Again, backed by 100 million, I think that is, 100 million metric tons of gold. Okay, so that's a lot of gold back in that big account. And the list goes on. Every single account here earning 4% per annum. And it's pretty much all backed. Most of the central banks you'll see is backed by gold, which kind of then obviously links with the other private bank accounts. Bullion banks on the private side. So these private banks are backed by the central bank, which is backed by gold. On the private side, that is. Public side, again, everything's unlimited because it's fiat currency. And here's the biggest of them all, Central Bank of Switzerland with account number. Okay, just count the amount of zeros. Deposit and guaranteed in the Union Bank of Switzerland with account name and number time deposit, 4% per annum. And then again, here you've got the accounts of Spiritual Wonder Boy, King David Anthony, Santiago Martin, etc., etc. King Solomon. You also got the Joseph P. Rizal, okay, Judge Sampson, King Bernard Caprio, account number. And then old green gold, uncut gold, diamond, platinum, and silver. Time deposited 4% per annum, eternal guarantee. You also have an Alpha Omega account, okay, Alpha Omega ring as well, which holds small pieces of diamonds with a large diamond in the center, preserved during the early times that Adam cannot forever be allowed to display or summon for inquiry. Time deposit with 4% per annum, etc. Okay, so I've actually read in some of these documents, them going into the origin of where the Garden of Eden is actually located in the Philippines, which is quite fascinating because it otherwise confirms and correlates with the research I've done from the Freedom Teachings with Ashiana Dean, Ashiana, with her claiming that the Anunnaki, the Anuseraphim races of the Enki and Enlil Marduk lines who came to visit Earth back in around 200,000 BC, I think it was, they were mining Earth for gold, okay, which Earth is rich in. Earth is the heart, it's anagram for the heart. Heart is green and gold, okay, it's basically where a lot of gold is being produced. And they needed it for Nibiru, where they were living, in order to sustain their atmosphere and fuel their immortality. But I think one of the race lines, I think the Enlil or Enki, I can't remember which one, were doing all the groundwork, whilst the other ones were kind of the managerial side of things, and they got fed up with having to do the hard labor. So they all agreed to start fighting in order to end the dispute amongst each other. They agreed to grab some of the local primates, okay, the local monkeys, okay, I believe in Indonesia and Philippines, and splice some of their DNA with them in order to create the lulcas-neanderthal, okay, which then became the Cro-Magnon Neanderthal over the years as it kind of developed and evolved. But they were used and made, so the genesis of the lulcas-neanderthal and the cavemen, that those lines of the Illuminati Leviathan races came up through later with biogenesis contracts, actually originated in so-called the Philippines and Indonesia, due to the Anunnaki splicing their DNA with local monkeys. Okay, the human angelic form had always existed on Earth prior to that point because we were seeded here. Okay, the human angelic race was created as a cosmic doctor race in order to help heal this time matrix towards the end of this conflict that's been going on amongst multiple races, and to offer a template that was imbued with the codes of the Stargates, with the Universal Stargate template pillar system, the Templar, in our DNA in order to run, anchor, open, operate, and shut the gates, interdimensional gates that link to special planets, which Earth is, Universal Stargate 3 that we were seeded here. Okay, and this is human seeding 3 in order to help heal and to provide biogenesis contracts of fallen souls want to come back through an eternal body form to develop their 12-strand DNA template to get up and out of this time matrix and ascend organically when you come back in alignment with the law of one. Okay, and so the human template was actually brought forward by God's source from the best of the best to splice the best of the best of the interstellar races in our time matrix in a human form, that all these other races, the Draconians, the fallen seraphim races, insectoids, avian, reptilians, the Anu Elohim, the Lurans, Anu Seraphim, okay, and everything in between, were able to come through the human form, don a human mask, holographically speaking, which will help kind of try and heal these conflicts, which a lot of them were based off of just differences also of appearance, okay, across all these different interstellar races, in order to bioregenerate, bring back your 12-strand potential through the human form, which will then allow you passage organically back to eternal life and ascension out of this holographic time matrix. Okay, so fascinating how it ties in. And I've traveled to Indonesia, and I've not traveled to the Philippines, but in Indonesia especially, I mean, it's all around the same kind of region, right? Southeast Asia. That certain individuals there are certainly showing similar genetic expressions, okay, of some of the local monkeys there, that you can certainly see this kind of hybridization program that went on. That's quite clear and quite strong genetically speaking through the appearance of some of the humans there. So that is unfortunately the origin of Adam and Eve in the garden as well, which is kind of multifaceted. It has got a few other elements in certain periods of time that's woven into that myth of Adam and Eve. But that is otherwise, with this lens, okay, with regards to the genesis of probably why these lands were so rich, was because these Neanderthals, lulcas-neanderthals, were going off and doing all the hard labor to mine for gold and storing them, okay, in the Philippines on behalf of the Anunnaki, who are extracting it to use for their planet Nibiru, to sustain their atmosphere and perpetuate their immortality. That those lines, Adam and Eve, that came out through probably the first individuals, the mating pairs that they created, were then brought all the way up and through, proliferated, that the Illuminati Leviathan races were used in order to come back in as fallen souls under the guise of, you know, some of these fallen Anu Seraphim races, Anunnaki races, to bring them back up through the human template. That once they got to, I think, the Levi, things beyond the Cro-Magnon, the Levi, they were able to start mating with the humans. They decided to, yes, that's a good place to start for a biogenesis contract for these fallen Anunnaki races. This Neanderthal being already has the coding of the DNA of these races in them, so the souls can come in and merge with that perfectly upon, you know, reincarnating here. And then once that developed up to a certain level, it was able to then interbreed with the human angelic template in order to perpetuate this blended and stitched bloodline going forward. That the whole idea of it was to, over many generations, get the fallen back up to the higher order of the 12 substrand DNA activated human angelic, that will allow that individual and that whole bloodline and race of fallen souls seeking redemption, so sick of playing Battlestar Galactica and fallen anti-Christic, taking a stance against God's source. They wanted to come back, okay, which is allowed in order to get up and out of there, and you know, basically go back into eternal creation of love, unity under the law of one. Okay, but obviously over time, this is where these fallen races kind of agreed and joined the Emerald Covenant agreements for pyrogenesis contracts, redemption contracts. And after a certain point of getting their fallen race lines up to a certain level with, you know, interbreeding with the higher stranded human angelics and kind of, you know, stitching those bloodlines together, they then reneged, okay, and then took control of all those fallen souls within those bloodlines in order to help perpetuate their control of Earth within the Universal Stargate Templar Pillar system, okay, and that's otherwise the origin of the Illuminati Leviathan bloodlines, that they came up through Adam and Eve, which were monkeys spliced with Anunnaki DNA that were later mated or stitched with the human angelic bloodlines, and then each time they got one up, which gave them extra DNA strand activation, which gave them extra control of the stargates here. You've got, you know, 12 main stargates with which are linked to the 12 DNA strands. Okay, so as you get more, you gain more control to the stargates as your template gets more strands activated, and you can gain more of that with these agreements for these bloodlines. And by regenesis, you then have more control. But then if you haven't got a D12 template, you're still able to be kind of manipulated by some of the fallen regressive races, because you've still got, you know, aspects of yourself that are carrying the fallen DNA imprint of these fallen race lines that they can plug into and then use you to perpetuate their own agenda, which is obviously the whole origin and genesis of the Illuminati Leviathan races. Okay, and probably quite a lot of other individual bloodlines that are kind of, you know, branched out from that, which is where people have susceptibility to these kind of stories, because it is quite literally in their DNA, with how they came back with, you know, wanted to bioregenerate to get up and out of it. That human form was already created some 560 million years ago in order to be seeded on these planets all throughout the Universal Templar pillar system in our 15-dimensional holographic time matrix. If you guys want to find out more about this, I go through it all in my book, Tales of a Self-Initiate, and did a YouTube presentation based on each chapter, highlighting exactly that. Okay, that I've got one chapter that goes into all of this, and then also showing you the different angles and lenses to decode the Adam and Eve myth as well, the apple and the Garden of Eden. Okay, but certainly with this story, the Garden of Eden, and what they're claiming was the Philippines, because that's where these races were first created to mine gold on behalf of the Anunnaki. So yeah, fascinating how that kind of ties in. So that's a little segue there. So we're going to come back to this document. So as you can see here, you know, more private bank accounts. Okay, and here it's actually a banque privée, which is French for private bank account. Okay, by Edmund D. Rothschild, and that's quite interesting. So yeah, there is such thing as private bank accounts. And then here you got, yeah, another big account, USB Switzerland, which has quite an interesting stipulation. It says, for above authorized party who must not commit marital violation, time deposit with 4% per annum, and to be matured upon submission of their both hand and foot marks to any foreign agencies in the Philippine Islands. And you've got the White Eagle account, White Vatican account, White Mongolia accounts, okay, and the UBS account's quite a big one, linked to the spiritual wonder boy King David account, obtained by Antiano Diaz Santiago, solely inherited to Anthony Santiago Martin, his fourth degree grandson. Okay, so maybe this individual is a grandson of the Tilano family through Ferdinand E. Marcos. I'm not too sure. Like I said, there's hardly any information apart from this individual being shown in this photo that got my hands on with the website that has since been taken down. Whether he was part of that bloodline lineage, who knows? But what I'm trying to say is they were either captured or threatened to not roll out the wealth on behalf of humanity and otherwise abide by the agendas of the self-serving Illuminati Leviathan races, okay, of these banking cartel families that are controlled by these fallen angelic race lines like the Draconians, Anu Seraphims, the Anunnaki, Anu Elohim, etc. Okay, so jury's out on that one, not too sure, but certainly is related to Ferdinand E. Marcos, and that's all that matters, under his trustee decree. So yeah, we got some other interesting names. Divine Easter Egg account, it's quite a big account. Divine Crystal account, and Sunflower account, and you've got the Maria Christina or Divine Magdalene account. Okay, then we have Bank for International Settlement account, which is infinite. Again, eternal guarantee. And the list goes on, all right? You also got the United States Federal Reserve, okay, which is quite a big account, which has got gold deposited in there because it's all backed by gold. So the private side, they all deal in gold. It has to be bullion. These are bullion banks. It's only on the public side where we've been floated under the Maritime Admiralty system of substanceless colorable currency and colorable title and colorable contracts. Okay, and that's all part of the game of enslavement here, Babylonian slave driving techniques. So the answer is on the private side. So how do we do that? You must dispose of that estate that's been set up under your birth certificate, which is not a certificate of live birth. Okay, and you can only do that via will. All property may be disposed of by will. Okay, and that's why I said in my previous video, went through and combed through all of the documents I put together during the forensics and the forms surrounding my birth, and the will of the straw man to have a pop at, bring myself back into the private side. Okay, so this is where these guys are. This is where the remedy is. These guys are dealing in gold, substance, certificate of live births, right? Not this fictional straw man, colorable entity created off the back of the placenta. So you have the World Bank Group, again, Eternal International Monetary Funds, and you have the Central Bank of Russia, again, quite a hefty account with a lot of gold in there. And the Vatican City Bank, central bank. Okay, again, another whopping account with a lot of gold. And so we come into here, we see some more of these kind of code names: Infinite United States Dollars, Spiritual Wonder Boy, Maria Christina, Humanitarian National Development Program. That's the main purpose of the whole, document for the world assets, what was intended for its use. Institution location, top secret and worldwide. Institution keeper, United Nations organization. So the Committee 300, basically, that's the top secret and worldwide. I mean, I don't think they have one fixed location. They just meet up privately in many different locations and hash out in the minutes of the meetings, what it is they wish to do, okay, on the world stage, on the private side of the ledger. And yeah, so this was all formalized in New York, the HQ of the United Nations. So here's quite interesting. You'll see a few of these documents. He puts his left thumbprint and right thumbprint on there, which is quite interesting. So general identical instrument, certificate of live birth, as we saw before. This is otherwise one of the accounts, if you recollect. It's not listed there, but there's other ones that pretty much all goes back to Ferdinand E. Marcos that he had control over. And at the time, Queen Elizabeth was the chairman of the Committee of 300, given the so-called decree, royal decree. And yeah, so we have under control of the World Bank Group, the Committee of 300, and King Anthony Santiago Martin, holder of birth certificate registration number, who reconfirmed and identified as the sole authorized signatory of the Divine Mother account preserved in the financial institutions and major banks worldwide. We've got another account there as well. This is the trust decree, if you recollect. And this also involved the land, okay, the title on the land in the Philippines, kind of gifted back from ownership of the United States, which otherwise was sold to Ferdinand Marcos. He bought the lands back off of the United States. Then we have here the actual sponsorship of all monetary assets and properties of the people of the Philippine Islands through ASBLP Group or Committee companies and Bank of ASBLP as resurveyed by the Central Satellite Information Center for the United Nations Organization and the Committee of 300, and as per automatically approved and recognized proposal of King Anthony S. Martin to save into eternal deposits any remaining funds and physical precious commodities preserved within the Philippine Islands and some of the world were, okay, as you can see all the different regions, with the amount of golds and commodities, right, that were kept. It's quite interesting. Said precious commodities were unable to touch, to deal, to transact, to negotiate, to facilitate for whatsoever official transactions, whereas said commodities were saved under eternal deposit with 4% per annum at per 10 years of maturity for the period of eternity, and for 10 years all said monetary deposits shall be intended per following programs: 50% for physical redemption, 50% for another time deposits, and something can read that continuously, run and operated similarly and eternally, and nobody else can resist and hinder this eternal programs for the benefit of the people of the Philippine Islands and the world. Okay, so pretty clear what it's saying there. And then you have the declaration recognition for royal title, HM King Anthony S. Martin. So you've got this fella was declared and recognized as Royal King of the Philippine Islands. The royal title shall be effective. Okay, it's validated, and no foreign authorities who signed herewith are allowed and authorized to resist and to pronounce negative comments against this paper and all papers of the trust decree. That through signing of reaffirmation of this instrument, all aforesaid papers, either original or duplicate copy with stamp, okay, receipts by UN Mail Office in the Philippine Islands, were being declared, rectified, recognized, appreciated, reaffirmed, and reconfirmed valid and authentic without denial, opposition. And other negative remarks, okay, and HM King Anthony Santiago Martin has been instructed to implement and to initiate humanitarian national economic development programs as sponsored by the declared monetary balances stated herein as given below as primary goal for the total human development of the people of the Philippine Islands and the world, and nobody, different institutions, groups and organizations, the Committee of 300 are allowed to resist and under negative comments against this instrument. Okay, so very clear what it's stating here, that this was the order, these funds, all this wealth should be used for humanitarian purposes, okay, to help everyone else become prosperous, wealthy, end all wars, bring peace on the planet, and do away with all these bastard entities okay, private banking, Carbell, Illuminati, Leviathan families, who want to just keep going against the Christic way of life, the law of one. Okay, want to keep wanting to destroy things and rob people of their wealth and prosperity, which we're all born. If you're in human form, you are very, very special. Okay, we are very, very special. We've got great potential of activating a 12 DNA template, okay, which is all part of that junk DNA that we have. That through inner work, we can certainly come back to being immortal, eternal beings, okay, who are actually guardians of this time matrix, okay, cosmic doctors imbued with a huge potential and heritage. Okay, so here it lists General Economic Development Program, again, just outlining the kind of humanitarian efforts and needs and kind of goals that this thing for this wealth is set for, okay, for people in the Philippines and the rest of the world. So it's very clear. Then again, this is the authority as per the trust decree of the successor trustee, okay, which is this entity, people acting through that entity. Whether it's an actual individual, like I said, not too sure. There's no information of this individual. However, it's certainly linked to Ferdinand E. Marcos. And this individual, whoever it is, whether it's a company, and there's just someone acting, pretending to be this individual body of people, agents, all have to follow the trust decree, trust indentures, trust law. You know, and that's otherwise outlined on the King Solomon Trust websites. We'll go through to reiterate. Otherwise, you know, just highlighted them, reading that out. Okay, and this is the authority of the trustee, okay, to have control over these funds and do as they please, and make sure that it's only used for humanitarian purposes, uplifting humanity. Here's a warranty, Treasury Insurance Reserves Investment Warranty, okay, both physical and infinite treasury declared here and above, that deposited and preserved solely by two ASBLP group of companies and Bank of ASBLP represented, okay, by the trust decree, was duly reconfirmed, declared, certified and recognized as infinite insured with insurance number as certified by International Association of Insurance Supervisors, Bank for International Settlement and Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, General International Corporate Registry. Okay, so the group of companies and bank was registered in the World Federation of Exchanges and International Organization of Securities Commission, as both concerned agencies instituted registry number ASBLP. Thus, this registered corporate group has solely authorized among international corporate group of companies, business, and banks worldwide to have and acquire these huge in magnitude treasury balances. Okay, but like I said, since then, the actual website has gone down. So I showed you folks in this video, like I recorded this. So I had my tab still open, but I went to go actually search for it on a new tab, as you can see here, but it just brought me to this page. Okay, so obviously it's been taken down. So what these guys are using to control the wealth, all of that wealth that's listed in Committee 300 document, I do not know. They've obviously dissolved this. I think this was dissolved back in, it's incorporated, okay. Yeah, who knows what's going on with that. It's obviously very private. Okay, but the whole point is that's what was used at the time to take control and be the successor trustee for this, all this wealth. That wasn't implemented, unfortunately. So I think it's been usurped, taken over. Or they are threatened, coerced. You know how these guys act. Look at, you know, what they did to Kennedy. That's how these folks act on the world stage. If you're against their agendas, then yeah, you'll be knocked off. But like I said, King Solomon Trust, these guys are going after them. These guys are actually putting together something to go after them, whether it's another ruse in order to all get us to kind of sit on our hands and think that something good is being done, like the White Hat movement. Who knows? But I mean, it's a pretty well put together website that's got all the documents listed there of the history and an actual fiduciary notice notifying these guys of, look, this is the reminder. This is what you all agree to. This is what should be implemented. And it's not. This is going against, you know, every single law of what you guys have been, you know, signed under agreement to achieve, breach of trust, fraud, etc. That, you know, whether these guys are actually getting any results or not, again, remains to be seen. But watch this space. You know, like I said, I've emailed these guys, is that you can contact them to see what's going on, and whether there's any updates and news as to what's happening with this. But yeah, otherwise very interesting, and they very credible website. They put, like I said, put together very well. So yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. So here we got the general home currency clearance. Okay, so King ASM, who frequently represented for ASBLP group of companies, and the bank was the only sole person among all the people worldwide that has having full authority to use a well-known currency worldwide due to its acquisition of sole huge amount of funds intended for him alone, and he's the sole person who represents for its people what's guaranteed by those international financial signatories here and below. All particular privileges and universal rights was reconfirmed and recognised by all signatories, appeared their hand here and below and above, and they represent to confirm, recognise and certify the validity and authenticity of this particular document, such as UNEP for lands, the Philippine Islands, UNDP, ILO for the Humanitarian National Development Programme, and UNCDF for Capital Development Programme, to restructuring a strong country in the world that promotes social welfare and development, peace making, and law-abiding citizens. Okay, so we're going to have this is a public video. Okay, so every single person that's watching this, the whole world for that matter, so it's a public platform. This again is an announcement, in a sense, in order to let the people know what every single one of these individuals who are forming the Committee of 300, working through all agencies and guardians beneath them, okay, with these world international agencies like the World Bank, Bank of International Settlements, United Nations, okay, International Monetary Funds, that these folks, and even some of these private international institutions, okay, like the Forex, Gain Capital Group, International Labour Organization, the World Federation of Exchanges, International Association of Insurance Supervisors, all agreed to ensure that all of these assets were going to be used for humanitarian purposes, welfare programs, uplifting humanity, okay, not hoarding this wealth for private gain and using this place as like a giant laboratory, treating every human as a goyim, above chattel. No. The funny thing is, the Illuminati Leviathan races, your origin comes from monkeys. So it's you guys that need to take a look in the mirror, and you folks are graduating yourself because you're suffering from the fallen consciousness of these, your progenitors, okay, have gone against God, anti-Christic, who've got no legacy, to cut away from the eternal flows of source, which is why they're scared of losing their immortality. So they have to fight over finite resources and be vampires sucking off living systems in order to perpetuate their immortality and their lives, okay, that has no foundation, that has no legacy, and it's all coming to an end, okay, because they're going to end up going down a black hole in a finite life entropic system, black hole technologies that they're just going to go as space dust, because we're at the beginning of the end or the middle of the end of everything basically being reset. Okay, so it's not too late for you folks to realign, make the right choice and decision, and come back on board the law of one, the Christic ways, treat everyone equal, because that's what we are. Okay, that's what the law of one recognizes, that we're all individuated faces of the same God source, pouring itself into external creation to experience space, time, and matter, to get to know ourselves through each other, wearing these different masks and templates. Okay, that we are all one. So yeah, this is like a public announcement, and to help raise the awareness of individuals, to let them know what they agreed to. Okay, and we're going to list all the signatories in a second as well, but these are some of them. There's some pretty powerful organizations, right? Bank for International Settlements, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. These are companies, don't forget, the principal. And so all agencies, even if there's different signatories to them, they're all signing on behalf of that agency, which is a corporation, which is a person recognized in law, as you know, under this legal system, that has agreed to uphold this Treasury certificate and this agreement as it mentions, the trust decree, which is C3-AM-01, which we'll go through. Okay, the International Organization Securities Commission, UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs. So like I said, inequality, criminality, poverty, scarcity, it's all made up. It's all engineered. Poverty, inequality is just an accounting and distribution issue. That's something that can easily be fixed within a few weeks. This whole system changes. It's so easy to change this world to become more Christic, but it's just the people in control do not want that. And it's about time that changes. And through becoming aware of documents like this, video presentations like this, making the people aware of what these guys agree to as agents to the principle of these corporations that should be acting in alignment with this trust decree, yeah, we need to put pressure on these guys intelligently, peacefully, and honorably. So we have general acknowledgement for aligned inter-union organization. This company, ASBLP, was acknowledged by inter-union organization worldwide, an aligned inter-union organization by the European Union, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, Association of Southeast Asian Nation, Organization of American States, and Organization of African Union. General acknowledgement for independent trade organization. Okay, the ASBLP group of companies and Bank of ASBLP was acknowledged by the World Trade Organization as an independent trade organization in the world, which only Philippine Islands is free from trade regulations, principles, policies, and laws adopted by said agency, and it has a trade license registry number AM9711, solely licensed to C3-AM-01, and AM971 license for ASBLP only. We have the general acknowledgement for criminal prosecution. So the ASBLP group of companies and Bank of ASBLP was acknowledged by the International Association of Prosecutors and the Council of International Investigation from criminal forgery and falsification of documents, okay, locally and internationally. The said agency was already cleansed, or cleared rather, from said offences, and no opposition of the authorised signatory below under this agency is subject to invoke and or pleads upon return of this paper to the UN Resident Office in the Philippine Islands. General acknowledgement for documentary rationale. All documents of ASBLP group of companies and Bank of ASBLP that under record and file in the United Nations Organization and other foreign agency was acknowledged and confirmed hereunto as documentary valid and authentic, and no opposition and pleadings are subject to plead and to justify in any judicial agencies worldwide. General acknowledgement for automatic humanitarian national economic development approval. All requisitions of H.M. King Anthony S. Martin that to be filed and aired to the UN Resident Office in the Philippine Islands was acknowledged, approved automatically, and no opposite and or hindrances and or guts and glory are allowed and invoked to plead to resist this acknowledged authority and privilege. General acknowledgement for holy matrimony. Okay, and then you can read through that in your own time. General acknowledgement for the eternal safekeeping of all precious commodities in the Philippine Islands. All precious commodities preserved in the Philippine Islands was acknowledged to safe eternally and cannot ever be able to touch, to sell, to buy, to negotiate, enter into contract, to assign with deed, and to transact any foreign entities worldwide and or other foreign buyers and or traders worldwide. Okay, so here's more lists of signatories of these organizations, as you can see. Organization of American States, Council of the European Union, the World Trade Organization, Council of International Investigators, International Association of Prosecutors, the Association of Southeast Asian Nation, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, the Organization of African Union. Here we have the general acknowledgement of the Chamber of Commerce membership, ASBLP group of companies, and the Bank of ASBLP with international was recognized, reconfirmed, rectified, reconsidered, and declared its general membership registry as forever valid and authentic. Okay, it's only ASBLP and all prime banks worldwide are allowed and authorized to trade into the program only stashed funds from US 100 million up to 100 billion US dollar deductible to the total assets and properties of the people of the Philippine Islands entrusted to and or assigned to any of his allies by H.M. King Anthony, and said declared stashed funds to be trade and program and exemption, the general mother account that solely handled H.M. King Anthony St. Martin are cleared and cleaned from different offences as identified by the International Criminal Court and International Chamber of Commerce Court of Arbitration. Okay, so as you'll see, there's mention of these funds being cleared from any criminal or illegal activity in the past, all the way back to obviously, how these accounts were being built up, used and proliferated. Once this case was settled and recognized that it all originated from the Philippines, so it's all owned by the Philippines and the royal family of the Philippines, etc. So it's quite interesting that the court obviously cleans the slate, okay, and makes these funds effectively above the law, so they can do whatever they please with these funds. However, no, they can't. They should be doing it and using it for the trust decree, which is for humanitarian purposes, right? But it's been given a clean slate based on what they may have been used for in the past. in order to purify the funds going forward for it to be used for what the trust has in its indenture, which is again humanitarian programs, welfare programs, etc., which we're still waiting to see because these guys have come in and taken control and not following the trust indenture, breach of trust. So here's more signatories from those groups. Okay, Board of Governors, the Federal Reserve System, that's Ben Bernanke at the time, International Chamber of Commerce, Court of Arbitration, the World Intellectual Property Organization, International Organization of Standardization, International Chamber of Commerce, the International Criminal Police Organization, Interpol. Okay, so you'll see here recognition, attestation, remarks. Okay, just read this. So the United Nations Organization and applied thereof some favourable rules and guidelines to render favourable judgment of and by the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court for this lawful claims and authorities of the people of the Philippine Islands and of the Trust Decree to above referred fiscal and land implement and applied thereof some favourable rules and regulations of international banking laws, policies, and principles of commencing and certifying this lawful claims and authorities of the people of the Philippine Islands and of the Trust Decree to above referred fiscal and land contrivances. These authorities do hereby seal forever these privileges as started to seal in the Geneva Convention dated October 25th, 2006 for routine of autographs of foreign authorities given below and ended on January 25th, 2007 in the UN headquarters, New York, USA. Okay, General Seal of Fortitude. We, the authorities, are hereunto sealed. This fortitude started from October 25th, 2006, ended on January 25th, 2007, as signatories signed for forever attribution for the benefit of the people of the Philippines, islands, and the world. Okay, we've got the UN Office of Legal Affairs, Secretary General. We have the UN International Law Commission. We have the UN Office of Coordination and Humanitarian Affairs, Sir John Holmes. UN Department of Political Affairs, Secretary General Ibrahim. Okay, so all these individuals should be held accountable for not rolling out this wealth for humanity. Okay, that's why I put this video together. We're going to slowly go through name and shame these individuals. So sealed at the UN headquarters, New York, USA, the 25th day of January 2007, to be concurred by some and all authorities of the Committee of 300. The executive and financial organization of the Committee of 300. Okay, so here you go. These individuals, this revolving door politics, whether they're still in power, who knows? Okay, but these are the presidents, the governors, the prime ministers, etc. for these member countries. There's over 193. There might be some more since then. Okay, but just slowly go through alphabetically, as you can see. Starts off the World Bank Group, and it goes into A's, Argentina, Armenia, Aruba, Australia, Austria. Some of them are foreign secretaries. Okay, some on behalf of the country itself, which is again is a corporation, all owned and controlled under this world structure, world management system, complex trust, blind trust, complex trust. So there you go. These are all the other individuals going to the C's and then D's and E's. Cyprus, Czech Republic, Denmark, Egypt, all held accountable. Breach of trust. All agents, okay, and should be trustees to the trust decree, which has made it pretty obvious all this wealth should be rolled out and used to benefit humans, mankind. Going into the M's, Morocco, Mozambique, Luxembourg, Namibia, Paraguay, Romania, Russia, Samoa, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, Thailand. Where's this wealth, guys? Where is it? We're still waiting. What are you doing with it? You are in breach of trust. Uruguay, United Arab Emirates, Andorra. Again, it goes back to the A's again. Inter-American Development Bank, International Monetary Funds, African Development Bank. So it goes into Zambia. Okay, then it goes into the European Central Bank. Then it goes back into the A's. Not too sure why. Maybe it's printed twice. Don't know. Looks like it might be. Paraguay might be just a duplicate. But if you go right to the end, okay, so you got the United Nations Organization. Then we see right at the end is International Court of Justice. So all the judges, as you can see, who ensured that, you know, they gave the verdict, you know, you guys, this wealth is owned by the Philippines and it must abide by the C3-AM-01, the trust decree and agreement. Everyone, okay, how this wealth should be implemented and managed. And we're still waiting. International Criminal Court, again, all the judges. And then there's His Majesty King Anthony S. Martin, left thumbprint, right thumbprint, ASBLB group of companies. So this obviously is an individual, but like I said, whether it's a alias for an individual to act as a successor trustee or whether it is actually the fourth grandson of Nani Marcos remains to be seen. There's not much information about him other than the website that's now been taken down, where there's a photograph of him here. Okay, that's otherwise, again, just bring it up. The website's been taken down. No, otherwise, I was still able to load what was on the page that I had open in the tab, which was the About page. Okay, there's not much, but yeah, you can pause and read through that in your own time. But this has since been dissolved, so what they're using to manage all this world's wealth that we've just gone through in this document, who knows whether they've made a successor trustee agreement. All I know is that they certainly did not follow the agreement and they've not proliferated this wealth for the rest of the world. This kind of goes into what Bill Turner said from New Zealand, that it's taken this long to allow for the new age of Aquarius to roll out, which is quite interesting due to the evil ones not wanting to give up, you know, their power and control here. And that might have something obviously to do with what we're seeing here, which is kind of bringing it into real life as to what's happening behind the scenes in the private side before this wealth. That whether they, you know, were kind of threatened, now under control of, afraid to implement, don't have the resources, who knows what's going on. But all I know, like I said, is that this seems to be the only organization that is listing and detailing the trust decree, the declaration, okay, all the certificate deposits, all the evidence that has otherwise been outlined, okay, involving the control and who should be accessing and controlling all this wealth and what it should be used for, going all the way back to the trust decree, that these folks seem to be actively involved with, trying to implement and roll out, going after these folks as fiduciaries in breach, and that if they don't, they're going to enforce. Okay, so that's quite interesting, which we'll go through probably in another presentation. I'll do another presentation. But what's quite interesting is obviously in the United States, we have mention of a law, which I might as well just show here. There we go. So 31 US Code, subsection 1321, money and finance, trust funds. Okay, you can see here the following are classified as trust funds. You've got the Philippine Special Fund and the Philippine Special Fund Internal Revenue. Okay, then the only other nation that's kind of like listed here is Puerto Rico, I think. Right down the bottom somewhere. Puerto Rico Special Fund. Okay, so whether they were using the Philippines as like an offshore hoarder of all this wealth that they're extracting from the public side and then siphoning into the private as part of this trust structure, who knows, possibly. Like I said, this is otherwise what these guys are claiming, that they are the Umbrella World Asset Access Reserve. They have access to this. These now the people in control, as the first trustee, successor trustee rather. and through the King Solomon United Tribal Republic Trust, they are now in charge, acting through the fiduciaries, which are all these organizations as guardians of the trust, right? Which is all central banks, all financial major institutions, and all nations holding the accounts of the Umbrella World Asset Access Reserve has been irrevocably transferred to King Solomon United Tribal Republic Trust by the last signatory of Karam family by execution of irrevocable deed of assignment, affidavit, and general power of authority. And all central banks remain the servicing bank for TVM LSM 666. Remember, that was the account of Ferdinand E. Marcos, or the successor trustee to finance the socio-economic recovery of every nation's successor trustee, hold the New World legal order, and embraced with irrevocable immunity, civil and criminal liabilities. Okay, so that's where we're at. That's what these guys are claiming. Okay, so obviously there's something that has obviously happened where this hasn't been rolled out to humanity, just given the hidden war, the invisible wars that are going on, right? So that is the full document of the Committee of 300, which is fascinating. As I said, I've just gone over briefly the history behind it. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to go in detail as to my notes surrounding this history. Okay, it's going to paint more of a clearer picture for individuals who are still unsure as to what this document is saying. Okay, so we're going to kind of like attack it. In the next video, we're diving into the history first and building the timeline as to, okay, well, why have the Philippines got all this wealth and what's happened, since the Mongols, they did agreements with the Mongols, and that then, proliferated across the rest of the world, then picked up later by European empires. And then obviously, they put together the evidence, the timeline of all this, and the characters involved to the international courts, which then resulted in this Treasury certificate being issued to recognize that fact that all this wealth does belong to the people of the Philippine Islands, okay, entrusted to them by Ferdinand E. Marcos, right, the president, all the way up through the Tolano family of the royal family lineage, okay, and just kind of hash out the finer details, and then we're going to go through every single document and the notes that I've made. They're otherwise listed here with the history at kingsolomontrust.com. Okay, which has all the agreements, gold delivery receipt, 400,000 tons. This is what these guys are dealing with on the private side. 1 million tons of gold, trust deposit in Yugoslavia, and all the proof. Proof is in the pudding. Burner proof is always on the claimant. This is a ridiculous amount of gold. I think that's 1 billion. Okay, and how these guys all been involved. Queen Elizabeth, all the way back then as well. So guys, humanity need to wake up. We need to, really start doing the shadow work. This is shadow work. This is diving into the occult and looking into the shadows, peering into that which has been hidden. It's all coming to the surface now. I know, because that's been my work. I've been doing shadow work ever since I got galactivated back in August of 2017. And ever since then, it's been hard work, clawing into, bringing light into my subconscious and unconscious parts of self and this world, which I've faced many a demon. Trust me. And look, duodecillion. Okay, these are what these guys are dealing with on the private side. That's like 39 zeros, I think. There's another one, duodecillion. All right, so we'll go through this. And otherwise, I've made notes in my document here, briefly explaining, okay, what's going on, what's being said here, which is quite interesting. And then we're going to go and read through this, which we'll probably read through first, which gives like a really good timeline as to what's going on. That's explained very clearly. All right, and then we'll kind of look at other things relating to the Committee of 300, which is otherwise in the document that I downloaded off ScriptD, okay, which is here, which was made back in the late 20th century, I think. Which obviously it's always changing, right? These members, especially if they pass away, but they select their successors. Okay, so it's very well thought out. And this guy's quite a good little history of the Committee 300. Go back to the British East India Company, right? And what they're all about. Oil, diamonds, gold, God. Quite like that. And what the whole agenda is. Okay, unfortunately. that they obviously appeared to be like, okay, yeah, you got this wealth, all right, this is what it wants to be used for. Okay, sure, yeah, we'll make sure that happens. Then behind closed doors, they're like, yeah, it's never going to happen because, you know, that's not what we want for humanity, unfortunately. Because these guys, like I said before, Illuminati Leviathan races, they carry the kind of agendas and philosophies of their progenitors, which are the fallen Anu Elohim, Anunnaki, the Anu Seraphim race lines, and the Omicron Draconians, who see the human race, obviously, ever since we were created, to, you know, be carried and imbued with the codes to access all of the stargates. Their main goal is dominion and conquest of the holographic time matrix. You can only do that by gaining access to the stargates. Who hold the key to the gates? The human template does. Okay, and so that's why there's been a huge infiltration attempt with human individuals, why we've been targeted as a race, and why especially the fallen souls coming up through the human templates. The only way back up to heaven, up and out of this time matrix, is through the human form, with the 12-strand DNA template activated biology that they've targeted and then used their own race lines and individuals to perpetuate their agendas and keep things in control here on planet, all wearing the human mask, okay, in order to kind of keep up the illusion, but they always go after the keys so they can, you know, conquer the holographic time matrix, and that's all part of the Templar quest. That's the true knowledge of the Templar that most individuals don't know on this planet as yet. I mean, there is quite a lot of people being activated like myself that have come into that knowledge with the likes of Yasha Ashiana, okay, with, you know, everything to do with her work and the systems involved, galaxies, okay, the black hole fallen races, and interesting Alpha Omega. Okay, we saw that there's an account Alpha Omega and Treasury certificate. There's a few other mentions, Alpha Omega ring. Okay, this all goes into the black hole fallen races, unfortunately, and their so-called technologies, which has all been written about quite extensively. So yeah, there's a lot more to unpack surrounding this. So we'll kind of dive deep into the history, okay, pick up the storyline, dive into the documents a little bit more in depth as to, okay, what's going on, how is this case put together, and probably look at the reasons why, as we touched on a little bit more as to, okay, well, why aren't these guys, you know, abiding by the trust decree and the trust indenture to proliferate this wealth and roll this wealth to the rest of the world, and then how that might tie into the 9/11 attacks, right, the Twin Trade Centers, the Twin Towers, with the so-called Nasara Jasara that was meant to be rolled out, and how the likes of Bill Turner, very good researcher, you know, the legal straw man expert, probably the best of the best that's out there, so you can tie in all these occult topics and decode symbolism, right, involving, you know, how to basically break free from this legal colorable system of Admiralty Maritime Law come by UCC, disguised as statutory jurisdiction, right, that he certainly says and mentions that, you know, it's taken this long to get rid of the old order because they didn't want to give it up and get rid of the evil ones. Okay, that maybe just around the corner, this is waiting to be implemented all through possibly these guys, King Solomon, United Tribal Trust. Okay, so we shall wait and see. But first step is to become aware. So I hope you folks enjoy this presentation and gives you an invitation to treat. I'll put another presentation together going through the history in order to paint a better picture and to go over this again, because it's worthy of going over again and again. Like I've done, it's taken me kind of 2 weeks to get up to this point of kind of understanding what this document is saying and the timeline of events for the documents and all these characters and the codes for all these names of the accounts, in order to kind of like surmise a picture of understanding as to what is happening. Okay, there's a few gaps to obviously plug in regards to, okay, what's happened since ASBLP companies have been dissolved. What are they using now to kind of manage that wealth as a successor trustee ever since they came in and usurped that? Who knows? But maybe these King Solomon Trust guys do. Doesn't matter. At least they're actually taking efforts. Potentially, when you can't prove this because they've not provided like proof of posting, right, for the fiduciary notices. That's why I've asked them via email. But certainly, folks watching this, hop into their website, contact them, and say, how can we help? Okay, how can we help release this wealth to the whole planet? Okay, we're all here to help each other. We all we all share a common interest of getting rid of these you know, self-serving despots of these anti-Christic Illuminati Leviathan races that unfortunately are suffering from probably full body possession at this point by some of the entities that are on planet, and their agendas, what they want to achieve, before things really do start shifting for the better. That we can certainly, as a people, voice our concerns, and again, let the universe know our intent and ask them if they want any help. What can we do? Okay, the first step is obviously becoming aware. Share this video, educate yourself, make your own video about it. You can probably explain it much better than I can, but I've tried my best, okay, given my level of knowledge at this moment in time. But it's just a matter of going over it again, gaining an understanding. Share this video, put a video together, help share the document with other people, make them realize that there is a hidden control structure on Earth, okay, that is acting through, these organizations such as the United Nations organization. All right, and you can keep it at that level. You don't have to go much deeper, but it certainly does go a lot deeper, okay, in the pyramid of control, where the Committee 300 is only here. All right, and that's very low level in regards to what's above it. And then when you get into the ET, interdimensional, okay, I'm not saying that this is solely 100% correct. This is from Dinah Monroe's map making. Dinah Monroe, what's it called again? I forgot what it's called. The map maker, deep state map maker or something like this, where he kind of puts these graphics together based on his research. But Committee 300 is just there, okay, on this rung. And then right down below is all the world financial control, world institutions, as you know, IMF, etc. That, this trust now through the Committee 300, should be acting through and shifting the agenda now to, bring peace, prosperity, abundance, equality, and equity on the planet. Okay, and unfortunately, under this current system, this is how it's all kind of designed in order to keep the peasants, general population, human livestock, as sheep and cattle, okay, in line under the control of the slave drivers, the masters, who have masters, who they have masters, etc., all the way up the chain. Okay, and chain of commands. There's a Merovingian bloodline. Like I said, most of these Illuminati Leviathan races, well, all of them actually come from the lulcas-neanderthal Anunnaki splicing with the monkey in the Garden of Eden, which was Indonesia and Philippines. Here, with this lens, an allegory of that myth, okay, that does have multiple interpretations that go across different aspects of time and places, but one of which certainly here with this given case, given this context, is where the Illuminati Leviathan race's genesis was rolled out on this planet, okay, through hybridisation of monkeys from the Anunnaki races who were used to mine gold. And that's probably one of the only reasons I speculate why the Philippines had an immense amount of gold stashed there, because they never cover why and how did they get all this gold there in the first place. I believe it was from when the Anunnaki came to visit, and they would have stashed a shit ton of gold there that the Philippines otherwise is very rich in gold in the first place. Okay, so they would have been certainly mining there, and Indonesia, and obviously would have stashed a lot of it there. That was later picked up and dealt with these agreements with the Mongols, which then proliferated throughout the whole world and was used to then come back and raid the Philippines unlawfully, which obviously they then attested, approved, and then found out documents relating to the wealth. This is the royal family and the statesmen in the Philippines over the last 150 years through these characters, Dr. Joseph Rizal and Ferdinand E. Marcos, who successfully gained back control of all the wealth that they proved was otherwise being used by these brilliant banks, okay, to back the private side of the ledger of these royal families all throughout the world and Committee 300. And they claimed that back with the lands also. And so with them knowing that they had control, they wanted to offer that to the world on a humanitarian, socio-economic programs to uplift all of humanity. And that obviously hasn't been done. Okay, so it's up to us to put pressure on these folks to make sure that they do that, and are held accountable under trust law, okay, in order to roll this out. All right, so thanks for watching, folks. I know it's a lot to unpack. I'll see you over in the next one where we'll go through the history and the documents for a little bit more in depth, and hopefully, once you go through that one and this one multiple times, you guys have a really good idea as to what's going on, and otherwise can help prove, like I said before, some things otherwise a lot of people want to turn a blind eye to, such as the Committee 300. Yes, they do exist. That's very low level. Okay, you've got to wake up, folks. For starters, get educated, become aware. and then you can start shifting your life and the lives of others. This 100th monkey effect. Okay, if you guys research that, it's all about once you hit critical mass, then the awakening can spread almost subconsciously to everyone else. Okay, so it's up to us as individuals, those seeking the truth, to become part of the 100th monkey. Okay, and it could be you watching this that is going to tip it over the edge for humanity, that critical mass, in order to help put pressure on these guys and shift things dramatically within this hologram on planet Earth and counteract the things that they otherwise want to achieve, which is listed, which is quite nefarious, very anti-Christic, which obviously we've got a snapshot of back in 2020. Okay, that will go through. That's otherwise outlined in this document by this gentleman who put it together back in, I think, the 1980s or 90s. That their agenda certainly hasn't changed. And yeah, so we can cast these buggers out of the earth and hold them accountable and roll out heaven on earth, basically. Okay, so that's obviously the goal. And it's all there waiting to be rolled out. It's not as if there isn't enough wealth, there isn't enough money. Yes, there is. It's just that they do not want to share it, unfortunately. And this is a sickness, it is an illness, and it must be healed. And if enough of us come up into awareness of this subject and start sharing it and demanding it, it will manifest because we are the creators. Okay, so thanks, folks. I'll see you over the next one. In the meantime, stay safe out there, keep studying hard, and stay sovereign. Ciao for now. See you in the next one.